Would you like to come on board and be sort of my mentor and tell me stuff that maybe I don't want to hear? He said, I'd love to. So we capitalised the team with $100,000. They own 10% for 10 grand, and Christine and I own 70% for 70 grand.
And away you went.
We went to the bank and borrowed the money.
People talk about calculated risk. People talk about only plan A, don't think of a plan B. And
there was no plan B.
Yeah.
Whisper, but Ferrari are interested in Indycars, and I've recommended your team, True Sport, as being the best team to associate with. Jim and I went to Maranello.
So you met with Enzo?
Yeah, we went there. It was like seeing the Pope, you know.
Yeah. There is a thing that you need to tell the audience about called the Gong Show. Is that right?
So, yeah, I got a call from the president of Philip Morris South America, and he said, Steve, we want to create another era of Brazilian drivers. Could you run a team for us? I said, well, that sounds like fun. We'll go to a racetrack, we'll put them all through the same things.
On and off track.
On track, they got 10 laps to warm up, 10 laps to change the setup, 10 laps on new tyres each day. We called it the Gong Show. Somebody was going to win the gong. Tony and Elio were there, and I remember going to the motel we're staying at in Phoenix, and these two kids walk in, and who's that kid there with the big nose? That was my first impression. Who's that kid with the big nose? Next day we'd go to the racetrack and get a fit in the cars, and then they'd do a run, and Tony goes out, and 5 laps I thought, Jesus Christ, this guy is going to be a star. So I thought, well, he's in. And then Elio goes out and he does about 8 laps, and he was really fast, and he comes in the pits. What the hell's going on there? Elio, whatever's bothering you, we can fix it. He said, oh no, Steve, I've blown my chances. What do you mean? He said, I can't drive anymore. I've got 3 cracked ribs. I had a big crash at Silverstone 5 days ago, and I'm in so much pain I can't drive anymore.
That's gutsy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, well, he's in.
Steve, welcome. This is, something I feel is overdue to do, and that's to tell a lot of your story. We are here at Ardmore, and I feel like, in some respects, life is full circle in that regard. The love of motor racing started here. Tell us about that, didn't it?
Well, first of all, thanks for doing this, Rusty. It's a privilege.
Thank you.
But yeah, we're at Ardmore, and Ardmore was for a long time the home of the New Zealand International Grand Prix. And I first came here in 1957. I was a 7-year-old. Came with my uncle and sat in the grandstands just literally 200 metres away. And it was an unfortunate day, but I didn't realise it at the time. It was when Ken Wharton lost his life, when his Monza Ferrari went upside down there. And that didn't really have an extreme impact on me because I was too young to realise what death was. But the thing that appealed to me was, and this is weird, it was the smell of the race cars, because they all ran Castrol R, which those that know, it's a sweet smelling oil, still around, not used that much. And the second thing was the sound of these race cars. So the race was won by Reg Parnell in a Ferrari. Peter Whitehead was second, and third was actually Stan Jones from Australia. And later years, I got to know Alan really well and got to be good friends with him. So this is where the seed was planted for me.
You grew up, am I right in saying, at Mount Albert, not all that far from Mount Eden? Were you a studious kid? What were you like when you were younger? Sporty?
I liked certain subjects at school. I think I underperformed because sometimes it was kind of too easy. But I went to Mount Albert Grammar and very grateful for that. I played in the first soccer 11 there, played cricket. I loved the sports, I loved the atmosphere of an all-boys school. It took me 2 goes to get university entrance, and I never had aspirations to go to university, but everybody loves their mother. I loved my mother dearly, and by that stage I was messing around with race cars as sort of a after-school hobby, and I wanted to join the Air Force and become a pilot, but I failed the colour test, so I was colourblind, so I couldn't qualify. And so one day I'm talking to my mum, and she said, well, Stephen, what do you want to be when you leave school? I said, I want to be a race car mechanic. She said, Stephen, listen to me. Nobody ever makes any money being a race car mechanic. So being slightly facetious, I said, Mum, what should I be? And she said, you should be an accountant. because they control the money. And I thought, there's a slight degree of wisdom there. So I went to night school to study accountancy and become an accountant. I found that incredibly boring and a complete waste of time, but I pursued it really because I didn't really think about anything else. And then I saw a job at South Auckland Motors here for a trainee accountant, but what appealed to me was South Auckland Motors ran a car in the Benson and Hedges production car race and sponsored a few race cars, and I thought, hang on, there's a bit of a link here that might help. So I worked there for 18 months or 2 years, and very, very grateful to my mother, because once I started owning my own businesses, etc., I knew what a balance sheet was, I knew what cash flow was, I knew how to read the basics of accounting, and that stood me in such good stead.
I'm intrigued by that. Firstly, in peeling back the story a fraction more, am I right in saying your dad was either a Ferrari distributor in the early days or race car distributor or something?
He was the Ferrari concessionaire, which is what they called it, and I don't quite know how he got that position. It was a part-time deal. But he'd come to all the races here and look after the respective Ferraris here with spare parts, etc. Very difficult to import Ferrari road cars in the 50s and 60s. There weren't many made because of import restrictions and, buying, quote, foreign exchange. So mainly it was a race car orientated thing. He worked as an aircraft engineer at the time with NAC. He worked at Teal on the flying boats. So that was his passion, so I ended up following him around. He actually became the distributor for Gordon Keeble cars as well in New Zealand, sold a couple of those. But he never had the business acumen, I think, to be a proper car dealer.
Okay. So you get this accounting degree. Business nous, your mum has instilled in you or recommended for you, but you're clearly mechanically minded too, were you? And when was the sort of first connection to that?
I think it came from my father again. He joined the RAF in 1937 as an aircraft fitter specialising in engines. He left the RAF in 1949, so his whole life was in the RAF. And he was an aircraft engineer, so I was around mechanical atmospheres at home and that, and he had a nice garage out the back, and I loved pulling shit apart. Lawnmowers that often required his help to get back together, and I just liked messing around. And when I was at school, I joined the Auckland Car Club, I think when I was 15, and met a few guys there, a couple of brothers called the Halliday brothers that were just sort of around the corner a little bit from where I lived, and they raced an Escort twin cam, so I went and helped them at the weekend as a gopher. Then I met a guy called Dave Silcock who raced a Jaguar 3.8, and I helped him. But ultimately the big jump was every Friday night a group of us used to go to Spears Speed Shop up on Great North Road, and there were two brothers there, and they were into making hot-up parts for cars, pistons, crankshafts, and they specialised in Fords. And one day I'm up there having a few beers, and I said, "Oh, that butcher's shop next year, we're going to start a speed shop. Do you want to run it for us?" And I was, I think, 18 or 19. I had no idea whatsoever. But I actually took the job, so we opened a speed shop up and sold all sorts of aftermarket parts, Weber carburetors, CBA lights, Spears products. So that widened my circle, and then I started building a few engines in there, sort of in my part-time. And I met a guy that's still out here actually and still competing, a guy called Reg Cook. And he ran a Mini in the New Zealand series. And I started working for him full-time. I think he paid me, 300 Kiwi dollars a week. And I built engines for him, mini engines, and we entered an RS 1600 into the Castrol GTX New Zealand Championship, and we won that. And that took quite a bit of, let's say, reading of the rule book and finding the loopholes, of which there were a couple. We won that championship, and then Reg said to me, "Oh, I bought a Formula 5000 car off Kevin Bartlett." And he said, "We're going to race that in the Tasman series." And I thought, we don't know anything about that. There was another guy with me called Ray Grant working there. Ray went on to work at McLaren's. So we got this Formula 5000 car from Kevin, Loved it, thanks, Kevin. But there were a number of little things that had to be fixed. We had to rebuild the engine, had cracked cylinder heads, yada, yada, yada. So we rebuilt this Lola T300, and Reg went and raced it in the Gold Star race at Bay Park. There was maybe 10 cars, and he won it. I thought, this is pretty easy. So we were going to do the whole Tasman series. We ended up only doing the New Zealand rounds. And I went to Australia sort of looking for a job in the Australian part of the Tasman series in 1974, and I hooked up with David Oxton, and I volunteered with him. So we did all the 4 races there, helped him, and David introduced me to Count van der Straten's son, who were looking for mechanics in Europe. And so I shook hands, told him who I was, sent my resume to them, never heard any more. Then one day I'm at home in Norrie Avenue, and there's a knock on the door. It was a postman. He said, I've got a telegram for Steve Horne. Okay. And the telegram read, Steve, we'd like to offer you a job as a second mechanic on a European team. We'll pay you £300 a month, be at Brands Hatch on April 20th, whatever it was. So off I went.
You were how old here?
I was 22, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 22 or 23. So I went to Europe and did the European Formula 5000 Championship. I was a second mechanic on Peter Gethin's car. Learned a hell of a lot. Made a number of mistakes. So we won that championship that year with Teddy Paulette. We won it again the following year in 75, and then 76, the Count had this grand scheme to go to the US to run the US Formula 5000 series, which was a bigger and a better series. So I think we had 6 or 7 mechanics over the 2 cars, and only about 3 of us wanted to go. And I'd met Christine, and we were sort of living together, and I said to Christine, we're going to go to the US and race. I'm not going. She had a really good job, actually. She was the main breadwinner. But we ended up going to the US in 76. We left, we had a Mercedes Transporter, a trailer, we had 13 Morand engines, 3 race cars, and we started doing the Formula 5000 series, and I think the highest we ever finished was about a couple of third places, because you had Mario Andretti, Brian Redman, Danny Ongaias, and they were tough competitors.
Yeah.
Jim Hall Racing was, his cars were better.
Okay.
So, but then in 77 they converted those cars to, quote, the Mark II Can-Am, put a fully enclosed body on them, and we did that series for 4 years, I think, with Warwick Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Lees, then Jeff Brabham, right? So in 1981, I always have these ideas, and I think I'm a contrarian. I like to think backwards, and I think, why are they doing it that way? And then I try to understand why they're doing it, and then I think, well, actually, this way might be slightly better. So anyway, we convinced the Count to build our own Can-Am car. So we started from ground zero. I used quite a few Lola parts on it, but I become friends with a guy called Tony Sakali, who was a professor at Cornell University, but they had a little wind tunnel there, and Tony raced himself and had designed this really cool RT1 fully enclosed body car with great aerodynamics. So we hired Tony, did a lot of wind tunnel work, and built the VDS 001. And I never forget, we took it to the first race. Jeff had tested it, and the first problem was we couldn't get springs stiff enough on it because they had so much downforce. And we went up to into Canada to race at Edmonton, and I remember rolling it out of the trailer, and Barry Green standing there, because he was working with a team up in the Barry, said, "Holy shit, we're fucked." Excuse the language.
That's all right that you can do that. No
anyway, we put it on pole, and the biggest thing we had to convince Jeff was to slow down, because A, it was too quick, and B, it just wore the tyres out really quickly. Anyway, Jeff won that race, beat Teo Fabi, and ultimately won that championship in 1981 with a car that even today, when you look at it, you think that's very special. There were 2 of them built. But at the end of 81, Rusty, I was kind of burnt out. I'd really been working a lot, and Christine and I were married at that stage. We'd done a couple of Tasman series in between. That's triggered another story, actually. It was a good one. And we said, let's go back to England and be real, be real humans again. So told the count I was leaving. We moved all our stuff back to England. We already had a house there. And I got a phone call right before Christmas, and it was Bobby Rahal, who I'd met through the academy. He said, Horne, we need you. I said, what for? He said, I'm going to do Indycar. I've got a sponsor, and Jim Truman's going to own the team, and we need somebody to run it, and you're the guy. So I said, well, I'm not really sure I want to do that. I don't know anything about Indycars. I don't know about oval racing. But then Chris and I said, well, let's just go and have a look. So I went over and sat down with Jim Truman, who was, I think, the nearest way of describing it to people is he was a Tony Quinn, a great entrepreneur, pretty, not tough on people, but he liked people to perform for him. He gave you the opportunity. So we started this IndyCar team from ground zero in 1982 with Bobby Rahal driving it. We went to the first race at Phoenix, which was an oval, and we had no idea. I think we qualified second to last. The car caught fire in the pits, and I thought, holy shit, we're in trouble here. So we actually skipped the next race to go and do some more testing. I remember talking to the chief technical officer about the setup on the cars, and he said, Steve, what sort of tilt are you running? What corner weights are you running? I said, what do you mean? I had no idea, but we learnt really quickly because we're all beginners. There were no, quote, IndyCar experts on the team. And that season we finished second in the championship to Rick Mears. I think we won 4 races, and suddenly we learnt really quickly because we taught ourselves. We didn't have any preconceived ideas about what this was. So Tasman series.
Well, can I come back a fraction here, because you've triggered so many different things. Can I come back to you talking about being a contrarian, right?
Yeah.
So you'd been a mechanic, but are you starting to lean in now towards being a team manager, a leader, realising that you could sit back and look at things in a different perspective?
I think in those days a big team was 10 people. But I did the hiring and no firing, and when I needed money, the account sent money. So I was a team manager, but I still had a toolbox, and I was the guy that put my head in the car. There were no engineers back then. I think with the VDS-01 we did have an engineer that helped with the setup, but it was very old school, Rusty. So I think just by graduating up the pathway, I got the official title of team manager. And then I learned as I went along one very basic rule. I looked at somebody when they're working, and I thought, could I do that job? And if I couldn't, I wanted to know about that job. But I also learned that if he was struggling to do it, because we're working long hours or something like that, I'd be the same. So my goal was to make it a job that was specialised, but they were comfortable about doing and became experts at it. The best mechanic we had at True Sports was a bricklayer.
Wow.
He was a bricklayer by trade, but he did all our transmissions and gearboxes, Jimmy Prescott, and one of the most naturally talented mechanics I knew, but he had no formal training. I was never trained as a mechanic. I taught myself. The only thing I didn't like doing was welding. I was shit at welding.
But you clearly, in analysing the roles and how to make them work effectively, there's almost like a military precision in that, is there not? Or an understanding of process, an understanding of how to do it the best possible way. Was that a natural thing for you? Or?
I think it was inquisitiveness.
Yes, okay.
That's the way I would put it. I was, like, we're having an interview here now, and I'm going to go home and think, how did he do that? what equipment's he got? How's that working? Yeah. So I'm always inquisitive about things. I'm a great rabbit holer. I go down all sorts of rabbit holes. Later in life, I taught myself about trading on Wall Street.
Okay.
Why did I do that? Because I was paying other people to manage money for me, and I thought, I can do that better. Whether it was true or false, I don't know. So I'm always been inquisitive about learning about things, and from Jim Truman, I learned to empower people.
Mm-hmm.
You never know how far somebody's going to go unless you give them the opportunity. And the other thing is, people have a specialty. You should encourage that specialty.
Can I come to Jim here?
Yeah.
Jim Truman. His philosophy, I think, or one of them that you spoke about, was do whatever it takes to be innovative. What sort of memories have you got of him that you can share with people?
First of all, he had a chain of hotels called Red Roof Inns, and he was continually building them across America. I think I went there, he had 100. By the time he died in 86, I think it was probably 200, roughly. He loved motorsports. He drove himself. He eventually bought Mid-Ohio Racetrack, but the basic thing he did was empower people. And I'll give you a really good example that kind of shocked me. So every month I'd do a report for him, written report, give it to him, never hear anything back. And he'd come in the shop now and then, but not that often. He's always at the racetrack, always doing deals on sponsorship. I didn't have to worry about that. But we were at a stage, I think it was in 1985, whether do we run March chassis or Lolas. So I did a big study on it, and pros and cons, etc., etc. And I took it over to him, and he said, "I'll leave that with me." But a week later, I said, "Jim, have you read that?" He said, "Oh, come over to my office now." So I went over there, and he was one of these guys, always had stacks of paper on his desk. There was paper everywhere. Yeah. And he shovels around, pulls it out, and I said, "What do you think?" He said, "I haven't read this." He said, "Why would I read it?"
Because he empowered you. He trusted you. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He said, "Horne, that's your fucking job, not mine. You make that decision. You've written it all down. Do you believe it?" I said, "Yeah." "You go and do it." So he empowered people.
Yeah.
But he always knew the boundary of empowerment.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest lessons I learnt from him.
Okay.
And I think I've carried that onwards
in your own projects and
my own projects and people I've worked with to a degree. And I love it. You watch somebody succeed. Quinny does it.
Yes.
He does it all the time.
Yeah, you've got a responsibility. Yeah. We're going to pay you to do a job, and if you don't do it, well, there'll be kind of consequences of that. Yeah.
Look at Josie. Yes. Sidetrack. Look at how she started with him and where she is now. He empowered her.
Yeah, and she's flying.
Yeah,
absolutely flying. On Jim, I mean, I think there was one point there where he owned a stack of land and was even going to build a track maybe in St. Louis and stuff like that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Let's come to what you were talking about in that season there with Bobby. I think, from memory, you win in Michigan. Jim Truman's not at the track that day.
No, that's right. Yeah.
You had to call him.
Yeah.
How did that call go?
Well, actually, he was out in Aspen because he had some property out there and he loved skiing. So I think in the back of my mind he thought, well, they're not going to do very good. I won't go to the racetrack. So anyway, he calls me after the race and said, "How did we do?" I said, "Well, we won." And he said, No, what really happened, Horne?" I said, "No, Jim, we won." He said, "Put Rahul on." So Bobby gets on and Bobby tells him, "Yeah, we won the race." "Well, who was second?" "Rick Mears." "Well, how much did you beat him by?" 3 seconds. And he said, "How did that happen?"
Awesome.
I said, "Because we'd learned the craft of oval racing, and Bobby was an immensely good driver. He's what I call a 360-degree driver. He always knew what was going on around him. He was able to explain the car. We'd learned how to set the cars up. We had a good engineer in Lee Dykstra, and suddenly, shit, this is fun."
Yeah.
So I think we actually enjoyed oval racing as much as road course racing in the end.
How big was the change from what you had done with some of the stuff in England and the early things around racing in the United States? But going oval racing is such a different beast, isn't it?
It is. It's obviously an American product, and you are initially skeptical. You think, why would people race around in circles? That's got to be easy.
But I try and think of it a little bit differently when I hear people tell me that are not necessarily into the sport. I say, think about an NBA game. You go there, you see everything unfold in front of you. Think about the strategy in an NBA game, the plays that they're going to do. A lot of that stuff comes into motor racing. You have to look at it differently.
That's right.
And it's a great fan experience, isn't it?
One thing we learned early on is be good at pit stops. So we were always the best. So we trained hard at being pit stops because it was obvious to me there's free money there.
Yeah.
No, oval racing, I love it. It requires a special discipline from the driver and from the team, but it's fascinatingly fun.
In that early period of what you did there, is it fair to say that first kind of season with Bobby, you probably performed ahead of where you thought you might be, and then the kind of couple of years that followed before we get to 86 were a little bit tougher, weren't they?
Yep.
A bit more of a learning maybe.
Yeah, I think the first year we exceeded our own expectations, finishing second in the championship to Penske and beating a lot of top teams like Patrick Racing and others was sort of a dream come true. And I think we might have got slightly overconfident. So in 83, I think we might have finished fourth in the championship or something. 85, we started, 84, we started modifying the car ourselves. And we just got slightly overconfident. I think got away from some of the basics we'd learned. We thought we were smarter than everybody else, which wasn't true. And it wasn't really until 86 we sort of regrouped and said, guys, we know March build a really good race car, but it's a production car. Let's fix the things that are problematic, like the wastegates on it, the body fit, the refueling. Let's fix all the things that make it a better race car, but fundamentally it's really good. So let's just have a better 86 March than everybody else. Let's not reinvent it.
The 86 race at Indianapolis is a highlight. Can I come to a couple of key things in the build-up to that? So I think at times you went to the far end of pit lane to be a little bit away from the media line, the media spotlight, let's say that. And you made a really interesting call around the team and keeping the team galvanised and tight. You went back to base, didn't you, over the month and let them spend time with family and so on.
So back then Indy lasted 3 weeks. The first time I went there in 82, it lasted a month. But it lasted 3 weeks, a lot of practice, running your T car, etc., etc. The first thing was I didn't like the media because I found them to be a distraction, particularly with the driver. So we'd go way down the other end of the pit lane. It was probably, a good 3/4 of a mile walk, and Bobby always complained, what the hell are we doing down there? And I said, because we don't want those guys hanging around. Those that actually make the effort to get down there, we'll talk to.
Yes.
But I tried to take a distraction away, and it kind of worked. The second thing was we qualified pretty well, I think fourth, and everybody worked on their cars in the garage in that week between qualifying and the race. But I thought, we live in Columbus, it's 3 hours away. I think we'll do a better job preparing the car, getting the crew mentally prepared by being at home with their families in their own workshop. Yeah, we had to drive 6 hours, but it actually worked. Everybody, I think our team was fresher mentally when we got back to the track. It kind of shocked Bobby. He said, what are you doing? What are you going home for? I said, because I think it'll just work better for us to be at home, sleeping in our own bed. We'd spent 2 weeks in motels and just going to the speedway every day, walking in there, wears you down.
So tell me about that day. And where does that rank for you? And I mean, you've done some incredible things in your career, but the significance of that race to crack it there in the mid-80s in a good period, and so what did that mean to you?
Well, obviously winning the Indy 500 is an epitome of motorsports. It's one of the greatest races in the world. I think it was a really tough race. There was a lot of potential winners in there. I think strategically we hit all our pit stops right. We read the yellows correctly. I think Bobby drove a fantastic race, but because before the race we talked about what are the things that are going to change during the race. And obviously, the race can be 2.5, sometimes 3 hours long, and the track changes, the cloud cover changes, the wind direction changes. Let's be aware of all those things. And I can't tell you about that, but you can observe it and think about it. And so I think we knew we were in the hunt, and it would, sometimes we were front straightaway behind. We'd make it back up in the pit stop, or something would happen and Bobby would get in that lead pack of 4 or 5 drivers. And we'd sat down and said, look, 100 miles to go, we need to just up it a bit. Same thing happens in Formula One now. You saw it yesterday with Max Verstappen. The guys on the race, okay, now go. So we hit the go button, and Bobby was right there, racing for the lead. And it's fickle because yellow flags, accidents can decide an outcome that goes for you or goes against you. And there was a yellow, I think it was about 10 laps to go, 8 laps to go, and we were sitting second or third. And we'd talked a lot about restarts before and how to do them and how to get the jump, and had a brilliant restart. Bobby hit the front and we won it.
Unreal.
But the biggest thing, it was so emotional because Jim Truman was on his deathbed. He was dying.
11 days later.
11 days later. So
you're welling up even now.
Even now.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Steve.
Here's a man that had given me an opportunity and he was gone. But we'd given him something.
Yeah, before he left. Yeah.
And I thought that was the end. I thought, okay, that team is now going to be dissolved because, the team owner's gone. But I saw him once more at his home. He was, in bed, and he was going. He said, Steve, we're going to be okay. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
But they read his will. And he'd left a large amount of money for the team to keep going.
Unreal.
And he'd given me 25% ownership in the team.
Sorry, Steve.
No, don't be sorry, because I'm proud that I can still feel that emotion.
Good. Yeah. That was so important, in what was to come, wasn't it?
So I didn't go to his funeral because we were racing that weekend, but we went on and won that championship. And that was amazing. Bobby was so damn good. The team were great. But, 87 come around. We won it again. We had the magic formula.
Yeah.
We had the belief in ourselves. We had the funding. Jim's widow, Barbara, was really good with the team. She was inquisitive about what made race teams work. And I spent a lot of time educating her. And it was great. It was fantastic. So we won 2 championships, little known. We actually won the 1987 Indy Lights Championship as well with a Belgian kid called Didier Tays. And he had sponsorship from Racing Team VDS.
Unreal.
Yeah, so life's a big circle. And it was emotional. Thanks for dragging that out again.
I mean, iconic car too, from memory, Bud sponsorship. I mean, it was... You've rattled off a couple of really good names as drivers to which I wouldn't mind tapping into. Can we talk about Bobby? What was he? All the different drivers you work with, invariably they're wired differently, and you talked about him being this 360-degree driver. What was he like out of the car and his commitment to racing? And the Rahal name is now from
I first actually met Bobby in New Zealand because he came here to do quite the Tasman series when they were running Atlantic cars, and he was driving for Fred Opert. So that's when I first met Bobby. He was driving a Chevron, and then he was running the Can-Am series as well. So we were around each other, we knew each other. I don't think we became bosom buddies at that stage, but I knew he was damn good. When he was doing Can-Am, he was jumping around teams a little bit, but he was always really fast. And I liked his racecraft. You just get a sniff of what it's about. So, again, 360-degree vision. He was inquisitive about what made the cars work. He knew when to push and when not to push. Back then, some of the road course races we did were 300 miles long. Like Cleveland was 300 miles. And we won that race because we just steady as you go, steady ship. We were always there or thereabouts, but when it was time to go. So by 360, and I think Scott Dixon's got this as well, he knows which way the wind's blowing, he knows what the temperature is, he knows what his tyres feel, and he knows what's happening behind him, and he can see what's going to happen in front of him. That's what I call 360 degrees. So Bobby was probably one of the very best at that. There are others I work with, but and Bobby's secret advantage, he was bloody good with marketing. He knew how to love on sponsors, which took a lot of load off my shoulders. Yeah.
Well, I mean, for people I was 16 years of age back then. So what's prize money like back then? What's the media attention like?
It was strong. Prize money was really good. I think at Indy we won $400,000 or $500,000, and that's some of that.
A lot of money then. A lot of money. Then.
The driver traditionally gets about 40%. I think I got 10%, and the rest gets distributed through the team, etc. But in 1987, there was a thing called the Marlborough Challenge, which was outside the championship. It was held in Tamiami Park, and that was $1 million to win it. And I thought, Bob and I said, we should have a go. We should really focus on this because we're in a good position in the championship. We won that as well. So I think that season we won over $2.5 million. That's a lot of money.
Huge.
Back then, yeah.
Huge.
So the money was good, I think.
Somewhere here, the team continues. I may not have the timeline right, so correct me if I'm out of sync here. But somewhere here, Ferrari begins making noises about joining.
Yeah.
You lead the project, from what I can gather. The car got built, but I don't think you ever raced. Is that right? Did maybe
Correct. Never raced. No.
Cut some laps, obviously. Is it in a museum now in Maranello? Tell me about this project.
So it really started in 1985. Leo Mel was running the Goodyear racing department, and obviously Ferrari running Goodyear tyres, and he approached Jim Truman and said, look, whisper, but Ferrari are interested in Indycars, and I've recommended your team, True Sport, as being the best team to associate with. So Jim and I went to Maranello before he died, and it was...
So you met with Enzo?
Yeah, we went there, and I remember getting to the airport in Milan, and this guy had the sign up, Mr. Truman, and we jumped in this Ferrari and did about 1,000 miles an hour down the freeway to Maranello. Got there at 10 or 11 in the morning, and we went through the gates, and there was all this flash. What the hell's all that? And all these photographers hidden around were taking pictures. Who's coming to Ferrari? But yes, I met Enzo. It was like seeing the Pope,
Yeah.
And they wanted to proceed ahead with the project. They wanted True Sports to be the team that helped them and become the factory team to run this car in Indy, because he was passionate about Indy 500 because Ferrari had run there in the 50s, early 50s, and unsuccessfully. So he wanted to win that again. So we sent a car to Maranello. We sent, I think, 4 or 5 mechanics that spent probably 4 months there just working on the project. We sent a couple of Cosworth engines. They dynoed them, they looked at them, and produced a car designed by Gustav Brunner. But Ferrari was struggling in F1 at the time. There was a lot of politics going on. There was rule changes around engines. I think that played somewhat into the final decision. But Harvey Postlethwaite was the F1 designer. Nice guy, did a reasonable job, I think. But they hired John Barnard from McLaren. So John went to Ferrari, and I think he made the right decision. He said, if we're going to win F1, we need to put this IndyCar project to one side. We can't do both at once. And he was correct. So the Ferrari project got put on ice. They paid us out of the contract, and the car was built. I think it might be in the museum at Indy, actually.
Okay.
So I've seen it. It ran on the track. Michele Alboreto drove it twice, I think, but that was the end of that project. So it's a period of my life that, again, I was here 7 years old watching a Ferrari win the New Zealand Grand Prix. That, as you say, it just keeps going full circle. Yeah.
You are, I think, a great coach, and you have some great one-liners, some great life lessons, I think. One of them you talk about is emotion being the enemy. Just explain what you mean. I mean, it seems quite obvious in a motor racing sense. Try and take that out of it, but
I don't think I'm an emotional person. I think I might have cracked there a little bit, but emotion in motorsports to me means you get upset with the guy you're racing against, you get upset with the mechanic next to you because he made a mistake, you get upset because I've got to work long hours, and they're all emotional things. So if you can control that emotion, particularly as a race car driver, you're going to be better than the guy next to you because he will be going through similar emotions. So I always try to teach the kids, look, don't get too wrapped up in, he did this to me, I'm going to get him at the next corner, or come in and tell us in the pits about something that happened on the track that triggered an emotional decision. It's wrong. It's your enemy. Control it. Bobby was really good at it. And I think, Rusty, over the years, you've seen drivers become too emotional, and it hurts them. And if you get too emotional, it can actually have serious consequences. So that was always my one-liner: emotion is the enemy.
Yeah, it's. I mean, one of many great things that you've spoken about over the years. In that period there, Jim passes. There is a plan, if you will, from a family perspective to keep True Sports going, and so on. Just walk us through the next kind of few years there and how that progresses.
Yeah, I think the sport's always evolving, and I realised that in 1987 that we were buying chassis from England, March, and Lola's every year. Throw the old one away and you'd buy a new one because they were better. They evolved. But Penske was building his own cars in England, and it became obvious to me that if you control your own destiny a bit more, you could always make a March better or a Lola better, but if fundamentally there were some things that you didn't like about it, you couldn't change those. And the other thing that was happening is the engines were changing. You know, we'd always use Cosworth, the DFXs. They were bloody good engines. Everybody had the same. But Ilmor had come along, funded by Penske, and they were building and had built a better IndyCar engine. So I realised I've either got to have that engine to be right at the front or do something else. So we tried to get an Ilmor engine, and it was controlled by Pat Patrick and Roger Penske at the time. And there was a lot of round and round in circles, but it became clear that those that were going to get that very limited supply of engines going forward were not going to be teams that, in my opinion, would threaten that
those
dynasty.
organisations, right.
So we couldn't get it. It was always, well, next year you're first on the list. So again, being a contrarian, I thought, well, we've got to control our own destiny with engines a bit. So I think I was kind of ahead of the times. We decided to go with Judd engines, which were branded Honda Judds.
Okay.
Right. So I realised there was a Honda involvement there somewhere, and engine developments that made the engines was owned by John Judd and Sir Jack Brabham. Sir Jack obviously had a strong connection with Honda, so I put two and two together and got about 8. And so we became the US distributor for Judd engines. Ran them in 1988 and 1989, continued to develop them. We got them going better. They were never super competitive on ovals, but on road courses they weren't so bad. But where the Ilmor engine had a big advantage was in the electronics on the engine. So they could control each cylinder, they could control their fuel mileage a lot better, etc., etc. They could make more power in qualifying. The Judd had a semi-mechanical fuel system on it, and so I went and talked to Bosch, who were also supplying Ilmor, and said, look, we would like to use your product. Will you help us
an electronic fuel injection system, is that what you mean?
Develop it with, particularly for this engine, and I got a initial positive response. Then I got the phone call, oh no, we can't help you, yada yada yada, we haven't got the resources. But clearly
you're being blocked.
We're being blocked. So that was the disadvantage we had with the Judd engine. We went all the way. We had our own engine shop. We produced our own cylinder heads. We really got the engine working pretty well, but we could never quite catch up.
Okay.
We were certainly better than the Cosworth. Some of the teams were running Cosworth, but we could never catch up to Ilmor. So was that a mistake? I think I read the room, but I was looking too far down the road.
Right.
Honda eventually did come into IndyCar, and yes, we did get involved with them, but there was a period there that we were kind of second-class citizens in the engine arena, and Bobby didn't like it, and fair enough. I would agree with him. He's, we did win a couple of races, but he felt he wasn't getting the best product, and we'd been together for a long time. So he moved on to another team, and with Budweiser, I think he actually went to a competing beer company, Miller Brew, I can't remember. But we hired a young kid, Scott Pruitt, who, again, in the beginning, I thought, not 100% sure about Scott, but he was bloody brilliant.
Okay.
Bloody really good, and as history has proven, a fantastic Indycar driver. So we also, again, me looking down the road, decided to build our own car, because I looked at all the things that it took, and they all existed in America. And Dan Gurney was building his own cars quite successfully. So we decided to build our own Indycar.
There's some great stuff on YouTube that people listening and watching can go and find, called Made in America.
Yeah.
And you'll tell the story better than I can here, but I mean, you made scale models, you had a rolling floor, a tunnel, but I mean, you're doing everything.
We did everything, and interesting about the wind tunnel, we were in Columbus, Ohio, and during the Second World War, that airfield was a big factory for Rockwell, who built aircraft out of there, and they had this huge wind tunnel there, a big 40% size wind tunnel, but it was sitting dormant, and it was controlled by Ohio University. And we came back from a race one day, and I said to the team manager, we should go and have a look in there. So anyway, we got hold of the university. They semi-reluctantly let us have a look around, and we looked inside. Man, it was a time warp. Huge wind tunnel, not being used. Obviously didn't have a rolling road, but I thought, this is exactly, if not better, than what I've seen in England. So we said, okay, but we need a rolling road. And we got quotes from England, they were astronomical. And again, thinking out of the box, I said, well, a rolling road's just like a conveyor belt with some different stuff on it. And we had a company called Emerson Electric who made conveyor belts, right? So, and the CEO was a big race fan, and I talked to him a little bit about it, and he went back to his engineers, and I explained what we want to do and some design parameters, because really what we needed was a high-speed conveyor belt with suction underneath it. And they all got together and said, we can do that. So we actually built a rolling road in less than 2 months, I think, and it was really successful. So again, thinking out of the box, again, I just said it's not a specialised, it is a specialised motorsports tool, but it's just a moving conveyor belt that needed suction underneath it and some software. So again, we had our own wind tunnel, we built our own models, we had our own internal carbon shop, we had over 100 employees, because we had an engine shop as well.
That's massive.
And somehow I was able to, and I still don't know how I did it, to convince a lot of people that IndyCars should be made in America, right? And we're going to do it, and we're going to win. And I convinced Budweiser. They made a 3-year commitment to the project, which gave me some security, but a little backstory to that. I convinced Barbara Truman, and away we went. But unfortunately, in 1990, Scott Pruitt was going to be, he had a really serious testing accident, very serious. It was down in West Palm Beach, hit a concrete wall head on when we had a brake failure. Broke his back, broke his knees.
How'd you cope with that sort of stuff? I mean, Chicago, and they're kind of like family.
We had to cut him out of the car. We got him to the local hospital. He was conscious all the time, but he was in deep pain. And luckily, IndyCar Championship Auto Racing teams had a driver insurance program, and they had a specialised guy that all he had to do was look after the driver. So I called him up and said, hey, we've had a big accident here, we need some help. And I called Scott's parents, and the initial call was he's broken 4 vertebrae and he could be paralysed. And like, man.
Thankfully not, yeah.
So anyway, we organised a ambulance flight from West Palm Beach up to Indy, and a doctor there, I'm trying to think of his name now, can't remember, but he was a specialist in back surgery, and he fixed Scott up. But I remember that flight, like it's black and white now, getting on this Learjet, and Scott's on and I just sat there and held his hand the whole way.
All right, Steve.
And I felt bad because he'd had the accident because we made a mistake. we'd made a mistake. And I always regret that. But anyway, Scott recovered. That season we had Raoul Boisel drive for us, and he was good. But in '91 the car came out and first races at Surfers Paradise.
Yeah.
And we finished fourth. Lucky in some ways. We kind of weren't on the front running pace, but it finished fourth. And it went on that year, a couple of front rows, I think 1 or 2 podiums, I'm not sure, maybe not. And we continued to develop the car, but then I started hearing these noises from Budweiser. There'd been a management change in the sports marketing, and why aren't we winning anymore because we'd won? And I felt the rug pull starting to happen, and that's exactly what happened. And they said in the end, look, we don't think this is the right thing to do, we don't believe in it. And it was all new management, and that was the end of that.
And where did that sort of then align maybe with a change from perhaps Jim's family and what they wanted to do? Where did that kind of lead to?
Yeah, I think Barbara herself was unsure. It's easy to sell the product, and when you make predictions about the future and they're not quite in that window, then the doubt creeps in. But she was very fair. The team continued on for one more year. They managed to put an Elmore engine into that chassis, but it wasn't right. And they actually had a worse season than '91. But I realised that I'd put my heart and soul into it. I think a lot of people were probably a bit disappointed, and I realised there was no long-term future doing what I believed should be done. So I left. I think I left on reasonable terms. A number of the other key people left the project as well, and we went and had a few beers and drowned our sorrows. And then we said, shit, we'll start again. So we thought more logically this time. We thought, well, if we're going to build the infrastructure of an IndyCar team, we need to start with our heads in a better place. So we started with Indy Lights. Brian Herder was our first driver. We didn't have a lot of money, I think.
But this is the formation of Tasman Motorsports.
This was the formation of Tasman in 1993, 92. And we did Indy Lights, and we didn't have a lot of money. I think we capitalised the team with $100,000, borrowed a trailer, borrowed a truck, had a small workshop, probably the size of this here. Am
I right in saying you were almost reliant on prize money in some respects to go to the next race?
In fact, in the beginning, I ordered two cars off Carl Haas, who was the Lola distributor, but I said to Carl, I can't quite pay for them right now, and I'm working on budget. I haven't got a car. I've got hired Brian Herder, but he doesn't have a lot of money, and I've got another couple of drivers on the hook. Carl, do you think I could sort of just borrow one of the cars, and I won't use it. I just want it in the workshop, so when a prospective driver comes along, he can see it. And bless his soul, because everybody knocked Carl Haas a little bit. He was a tough guy, but he said, Steve, I trust you.
That's cool.
So he lent us a car, sat in a workshop. We hired Steve Robertson from England, who was blindingly fast.
Yeah.
Really good, fun guy. His dad was great, and we won that championship with Brian Herder. And we had to win races because it was 25 grand to win, and that paid the expenses to get the next race with Brian. And that started Brian Herder's career. He was off and running then, and he won the championship, and I managed to twist AJ Foyt's arm, and he went and drove for AJ Foyt.
Unreal. What was Brian like as a human being away from the car, and then even as a
lovely
racer?
guy. Yeah, lovely guy. A lot of fun to be around. He was a very workman-like, hard, fast driver. A bit like Bobby in a lot of ways, I think. I loved working with Brian. And Steve Robertson was just stand on the gas.
Was he? Yeah.
Like lap 3, that's my quick lap. He was fun too, and he gave Brian a really good run for his money. And Steve came on for the second year, and we hired Andre Ribeiro to drive for us, which was golden.
I know. I can sense you're a little upset there. He's been gone as we sit here, I think 2 years now, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think Andre was a foundation for our next level of IndyCar. He had finished second in the championship in '94 to Steve Robertson, but Andre had some money from Philip Morris in Brazil, about maybe 50% of the budget to do the season, and I just said, we've got to do it. We've got to get on and do it, because if I keep waiting until every last dollar's in the bank, we'll never get there. So we ordered some Lolas from Carl again, ordered 2 new Lolas, were able to get some Ilmore engines, signed a contract for 5 Ilmore engines. And then one day I get this phone call from a guy called Robert Clark at Honda Performance Developments. He said, Steve, are you coming out to the Firestone convention? It was in December at Las Vegas. I said, yeah. He said, oh, we need to have a chat. So I get out there and I talked to Rob. Didn't know him, never seen him before. And he said, look, we've got a bit of a problem, and really there's no team that wants to use our engines because they had a really bad time the year before, didn't even qualify at Indy. Would you be interested? We've been watching you. And
They took a punt on you. Is there a footnote to this story?
They took a punt,
too?
yeah.
Is there a little footnote to this story that you'd worked with Bobby in the past? It didn't go so well for whatever reason with Bobby and Honda, but you knew, and I think even he knew, that as an organisation, I mean, what they do in MotoGP, what they're now doing in Formula One,
Honda don't fail.
They don't fail,
no.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we by luck chanced it right. There's a funny story to it, because once we'd sort of done the deal, and I met the Japanese part of the management there, a guy called Mr. Osaka. He was probably in his 50s, and I thought, he looks familiar. He looks bloody familiar. I said to Jeff, do you know this guy? And he said, oh yeah, there was always this guy hanging around the Indy lights, 10 all the time, taking pictures, and I thought he was a journalist. It was bloody Honda. They'd been following us for 6 months.
Seeing how you went about it, seeing what you did.
Yeah.
What are you, in this point of things, you'd gone from 100 staff at True Sports, you've formed this, you, Christine, this humble organisation, you've got some success happening. What are you in staff numbers now? And are you putting into place immediately all of the things that you became so good at True Sports around people in right places, around process and so on?
I learned at True Sports a couple of really good things. Have good people, obviously. So the team manager at True Sports, his name was Jeff Eischen. He'd started with us running the test team, and Jeff was a bit of a grumpy old man, but he got shit done.
Yeah.
He was we're leaving the shop at this time on this date, and the cars will be ready. So Jeff came on board, but I also realised that I needed help myself. I can't make all these decisions without some good advice. People saying, Steve, you're wrong. Every time somebody said to me, Steve, you're wrong, I've got my back up. So Jeff became a 10% owner in Tasman Motorsports. He had equity in the team. And then I had a really good attorney in Columbus. His name was Stan Ross, who was an avid Ferrari collector, and that's how I met him. And I said, Stan, would you like to come on and be an owner in Tasman? It'll cost you $10,000. And he said, I'd love to. And then there was another guy that I'd met at Indy. His name was Ben Dillon, and he was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company that made Mastron scales. They'd provided the scales at Indy. And I said to Ben, and he was in Columbus, I said, look, I'm starting this other team. Would you like to come on board and be sort of my mentor and tell me stuff that maybe I don't want to hear? He said, I'd love to. So we capitalised the team with $100,000. They owned 10% for 10 grand, and Christine and I owned 70% for 70 grand.
Away you went.
We went to the bank and borrowed the money.
That's unreal. People talk about calculated risk. People talk about only plan A, don't think of a plan B, and so on.
There was no plan B.
Yeah, but you clearly had the assets in the sense of the acumen, the things that you'd learnt. You knew you could put the right people in the right places and so on. So in that sense, it is a calculated punt.
Yeah, and we had a really good driver in Andre. He was really fast. He had a lot of learning to do. Crashed a few times, but he was always crashing when he was fast. And he was a charismatic man. He brought the team with him.
It was very sad that we lost him in recent years. It was a great period for you in terms of the move into champcar, what you're able to do with him, with some support I think that he brought with Honda and so on. It was such an important step, wasn't it?
It was a great step, and we won. Very proud of this. Won Honda's first IndyCar race at Nazareth, actually, on an oval. Andre was a really good oval racer, really good. And we also were using Firestone tyres because we'd used them in Indy Lights, and this was their first year into IndyCar. A lot of people were gun shy of them, but I thought, I think these are going to be really good, and they were, in my opinion, better than the good years. So we had a Honda engine and we had Firestone tyres, and that made us right at the sharp end with a rookie driver.
How did you develop that sense of knowing that something was the right way, that you could see that? I mean, clearly Honda, because of its background, you knew that would come right. What gave you the confidence to go the Firestones? That's.
Well, we'd used them in Indy Lights. We knew their durability. We knew that they never fell off big time. We knew that they were very consistent batch to batch, and we knew the engineers. So they were kind of just building a bigger tyre for a different environment. Spent a year testing them on Indy cars privately. So I just thought it was such a logical decision. Plus, there were free tyres. So we had free tyres, free engines, and Honda bought the chassis. So suddenly our budget, where we had half the budget, we had the whole budget. We had to unwind our Lola purchase with Carl Haas. So I called Carl and said, "Hey, Carl, I got this opportunity," and explained it to him. He said, "No, that's fine." And I said, "Well, how much is it going to cost? Because, we've got to pay you something." But he was very fair, and Honda bought out of that contract. And I called Paul Ray at Ilmore and said, "Look, something's come up and we've got this great opportunity with Honda." And he said, "That's good for the sport. How much is it going to cost?" And he said, "Nothing."
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So in a roundabout way, Ilmore helped us big time. And off we went. And that's a little sideline here. So we had a shop probably twice the size of this in Columbus, Ohio. We had maybe 15 employees. We geared up a bit more, and Honda said, "Steve Horne, we need to insert engineers." So what does that mean? He said, "We need engineers full-time in the shop." I said, "Okay, how many?" 6. "Okay. You give special area for engineers, private." So I think I kicked the accountant out of his office, and they had but I had a little secret weapon. The chief mechanic on the Indy Lights program was a guy called Steve Reagan, and he was half Japanese. So I said to Steve, "Listen, mate, don't tell these guys that you're fully fluent in Japanese. Just hang around, listen to what they're saying." So I think for about 6 months we knew every damn thing they were saying about us via Steve. Most of it was pretty complimentary. In the end, somewhere they're having a beer and he told them, and they laughed their heads off.
This period is not the beginnings, but the sport goes through this kind of golden period.
Yeah.
You're already known and established for what you did at True Sports, right? But how are you now with Tasman and what you're doing? How are you being received and perceived by Barry Green, who you mentioned before, Roger Penske, and then some of those?
Well, I'd known those, the people you talk about. Most of them I knew anyway, because doing Indy Lights, you're in the paddock, and they kind of knew our background at True Sports, so it wasn't as if we were totally fresh faces. We were just reinventing ourselves. So that was great. And you're right, Rusty, it was a golden era. An era that actually made Christine and I financially. The racing was unbelievably competitive. I think it was better than Formula One. IndyCar, or Championship Auto Racing Teams, was organised as a franchise. And to get a franchise, you had to compete for a season and knock out one of the 24 competitors, teams in there, who could still race, but they didn't have the franchise. And what the franchise did, back then it cost $400,000, but it paid you quota travel. Every time you showed up, you got a flat fee of, I think it was 50 grand. So there were 14 races. Well,
do the math.
Do the math. So we competed in the first year. I think Andre finished like 10th or something, and so we actually kicked Dan Gurney out, which was kind of sad, but they kept running. So he lost the franchise. So I got that, and then the next year, Adrian Fernandez from Mexico came to us, who'd been racing at Gallus, and I sort of knew him, but I didn't know him that well. And he said, "Steve, I'd like to drive for you." So we sat down and did a deal, and he was Adrian was immensely good with sponsors. You had Takati Beer, and a number of other good sponsors. So he brought basically the whole budget, and we ran it for him. Great guy to be with. Him and Andre got on great. Won some races together, and suddenly I had second franchise. The first one we bought, again, Kristen and I had to have a second mortgage on our home, but it was a no-brainer. So, you can convince a bank with, if you've got the numbers there, they'll buy it in. And we had a really good bank, actually. I remember sitting in there quite a few times. But so we had 2 franchises, right? And
you're running this still in parallel with Indy Lights as well.
That's a whole nother little period. But let me finish off this part of the story. And Indycar was going strong. We were going to Brazil, we were going to Mexico, we were going to Canada, we were going to Australia. And there was big money floating around from, tracks and countries that wanted us to race. TV was growing. We were a threat to F1, there was no question about it. And Championship Auto Racing Teams did a deal with a company in Switzerland that owned the rights to World Tennis and some other big franchises, and they put a lot of money on the table to buy the rights. I think it was like $100 million to IndyCar worldwide for 5 years. So we, as franchise owners, we voted. We said, okay, we signed those rights over to them, and then it was really Pat Patrick, I think, that started it. He said, look, we should take this company public. We should make it a public sports entity and be the biggest sports franchise in the world. And he was actually kind of right. But there was a lot of discussion internally. What it meant was we would give up our franchises and the rights to the revenue for stock in this future company. So there was a big risk there. But the numbers stacked up to me. Some of the other team owners weren't so sure. Roger Penske was pretty against it. Anyway, we divided the company into 2. The technical side, which we still controlled, and the financial side, which became a public company. So for every franchise, you got 400,000 shares in this public company. So suddenly, Christine and I and our other partners, we owned all these shares in a public company that started at $16. And it kept on going up and up and up. And I thought, this sounds too good to be true. And there was a lockout period, I think of 6 months and 9 months. So again,
this the business side, the accounting side?
And I'm thinking, there's a lot of hype here. There's too much hype. I think it got to $31. So I hired a firm to actually slowly bleed some of it off for us, because I thought, I need to have the cash set aside for the future in case something goes wrong. Long story short, we sold $800,000. 800,000 shares at the market peak of around $30. So suddenly, our lives changed. We couldn't understand, how do we get all this money? And obviously our other partners got it. Some of the other owners stayed with the stock. And this was the beginning of the IndyCar wars.
This is a masterstroke move. I don't know. The simplicity of this is too good to be true, or this is the peak. That's a great gut feel, or however you've arrived at that. But when you look back on it now, your decision to move was
And IndyCar had grown so big that everybody wanted a piece of it. And Tony George was running the Indy 500. He felt there were too many foreign drivers. He wanted more Americans, yada, yada, yada. Long story short, that's a whole nother episode, but it blew up big time. Suddenly there were 2 competing series, and I thought, this is not going to end well. We'd already, we were financially secure, through luck. That's the way I look at it, lucky. Made a good decision.
You made that luck.
But I could see this war going on, and it really hit me one day. We had LCI as a sponsor, and they'd moved on because they got absorbed. And I had another big Fortune 500 company that wanted to sponsor the team, gone all the way through, taken nearly 12 months to do the deal, working with the president of the company, contract signed, yada, yada, yada. And he said, Steve, this is great. I'd like you to meet the chairman of the board. Why don't you come down and see us? And they were in Illinois. So Went down there, met the chairman of the board, and he's talking to us. I said, Steve, this is great, and the president's there, this is wonderful. And he said, I'm really looking forward to going to the Indy 500. Fuck.
Well, no.
And I had to say, well, actually, we don't actually go there anymore. Poof.
Yeah.
Like, I could see it. So that contract got cancelled, and I thought, this is a war of attrition that's going to drive a lot of teams out of business.
That story is a reoccurring story too with major corporations. I think either like Pepsi or MTV or
FedEx,
all that sort of stuff.
They all left. At the same time, I had Tony Kanaan driving for me, and he was a wizard. You could see he was going to be an absolute superstar. And one of the other team owners, Jerry Forsyth, who ran Forsyth Racing, had Greg Moore before he died. Nice guy, but very introverted, incredibly wealthy. He was nibbling at Tony, but I had a rock hard contract with Tony. But what happens is it gets in their brain, and Tony's sort of started talking about it. Oh, Jerry's going to do this, and he's going to spend this, and I realised, hang on, I'm on tenterhooks here with my biggest asset, so I need to make sure. I don't think I can hang on to this asset, but I need to make sure I get something out of it. So I said to Jerry, look, in reality, you're tampering with a contract of mine, but I can't fight you. You're too big. You want Tony? I'm not going to let him go, so go away and think about it. So he came back to Mecca. He says, I'll tell you what you do. I'll buy the whole team. I'll buy Tasman off you, and I'll just change the name. You just keep running it, and I've got Tony, and I've got McDonald's sponsorship, and happy days. And I went home to Christy, I said, somebody wants something that we've got really bad.
You put your whole lives into.
It's going to rip our soul apart, but it's the right thing for the people that work there, because I could see the thing was blowing up, and we both agreed, let's sell it.
Amazing.
Went to the other guys and said, let's sell it. Everything on the ground, everything will stay the same. Tony will drive, I'll run the team, yada, yada, yada. So we ran for a year as McDonald's Racing, and Tony won his first race with them, and everything went great. But underlying this, Jerry had some bagmen that were telling him what to do, then they were telling me what to do, and it ended up one day, we were planning for 2000, and I'd ordered some new Reynards. We were running Honda engines, and my parts manager comes in and said, there's a guy here with a couple of drivers with some new Ford trucks. I said, what Ford trucks? What are they for? And they said, they've got to drop them off here. And I thought, what? We haven't do it. So I get on the phone, and one of the bagmen said, we're switching to Ford next year. We've got to deal with Ford. So you need to cancel the Honda contract, and we're going to run Swift chassis. I thought, and this was coming from a third party, not directly from Jerry.
Yeah, no consultation with you. Yeah.
No, and I thought, that's me gone. So that was that. And we got out. Intact individually. Some of the other people got out intact. The team ran for a year. But he was having a big internal fight with champcar because he wanted a third franchise and they wouldn't give it to him. So he parked the whole team. It just went, it was a nightmare. And we got out. Yeah. We escaped. So that was in 2000. And I said to Christine, that's it, we're done with motorsports, it's over. But suddenly the phone rang. And it was Chip Ganassi. And he said, Steve, I hear you sort of got a bit of spare time. Would you and they were running Toyota engines, having a terrible time. Ryan Briscoe, Scott Dixon, they were having a terrible time. He said, could you just come and have a look at our team internally and see if there's something that sticks out to you that we're doing wrong? So I spent 3 weeks down there and I did a simple thing. I just created a list of 10 questions. And I asked everybody that I could, answer these questions, including the drivers. It became obvious. Their number one problem was getting free engines from Toyota because they were doing things to make the car better that were extreme, that didn't work. So the drivers were insecure, the engines were not good enough. So my bottom line, I went back to Chip and I said, mate, how much money is Toyota giving you? And he told me a number was pretty good. I said, they're actually destroying you. they're destroying you. So you have to get out away from Toyota, because as it stands, you're going backwards at a great, and you need to go to Honda because they're the best. So he did. And, the rest is history. So that was a consulting. So suddenly I'm a consultant. Next minute I get a call from Bobby Rahal. He said, "Oh, he just did a project for
Chip.
He said, could you come and have a look?" And on it went. So I did a big report for them, and Bobby read it, and I heard that ended up in the bin. So I don't think they enacted anything. Then I got another call from Honda and said, Robert said, look, we're looking at doing IMSA and sports cars, and ultimately we want to go to Le Mans, and we'd like you to build a team to do that. And I said, Robert, no, it's too big a project. I don't think I'm ready to take on. He said, well, could you help another team? So we went and helped another team that they were building up to do IMSA, and they did do IMSA and never got to Le Mans. So suddenly I'm a consultant. And then Tony Kanaan calls me and said, he said, boss, you all call me boss, he said, could you just come to the races with me? I just need someone to talk to. He was with KV Racing, someone just to talk to and have a look at things and just be my mate at the racetrack. So I went a whole season with Tony, and that was a lot of fun.
Lovely.
I wasn't his manager. I was just his mate at the racetrack. He paid me a little bit of money and hung around there. And so suddenly my life changed, and I realised people wanted my IP, which was strange.
I don't see it as strange.
No, but for me it was. For me it was. And there was other little projects cropped up. At the same time, and we touched on this before a little bit, we had a bit of money and put it under management, and I get all these reports every month, and lost a bit here, made a bit there, and I thought, this is, I've got to learn more about this. So I became a day trader. Christina, remember this. I'd get up at 9 o'clock in the morning when Wall Street was about to open. I'd go downstairs and I'd just trade stocks backwards. Sometimes I'd do 100 trades a day. I'd buy at 8, sell at 3, or vice versa. And I'm kind of proud of this, so I'm going to say the number. In a year, I made $2 million.
Crazy.
Yeah, but I lost $1 million the next year. Okay. So I still came out ahead. But suddenly I learned about day trading. And I also heard about this thing called Bitcoin. And I thought, I read, I studied, and I looked at it, and I thought, this kind of might be something I should sort of follow. And Kristen and I made the decision to move back to New Zealand full-time in 2012. So here I was accumulating a bit of Bitcoin here, buying it at $200 or $300. And long story short, I became a Bitcoin fanatic. Most people thought I was crazy. Most people still do. Christine says, I don't understand it. Are we okay? Let's just stand. Are we okay? We're okay. So I came back in 2012, and right before we're about to leave, I'm on YouTube, and this thing pops up, and it's Greg Murphy driving a Super Tourer, a bit of a sales pitch. And I thought, oh, that looks pretty cool. So I got back here, and I met with Mark Petch, and I said, I think I want to do this. So I bought a car. And we'll reinvent Tasman in New Zealand. It's semi-professional. Actually, we used the hangar next door as a workshop. Hired Mark Pilcher from M2.
Who you still have a connection with.
Yes, to run it. Freddie came on board as a sponsor, PR guy. I need a driver. So what do I need in a driver? I need someone that's not going to crash, knows the circuits, knows these cars, and currently doesn't have a job. Daniel Gaunt. So Dan came on board. I just paid him expenses, and I paid him prize money. What a find that was. Great guy, bloody good driver. Freddie found us suddenly I think it cost $300,000 a season back then, and suddenly we're just about, cash neutral. I thought, that was pretty good. But what I didn't realise, and this goes back to the whole champcar blow up, there was a bloody war going on here as well with Motorsport New Zealand, who really wanted to kill that series. And I remember the first race we went to at Hampton, there were 5,000 people there. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it was huge.
Cost effective, good names, the emergence of Scott McLaughlin, Murph's in it. It was awesome.
Supercar drivers wanted to come over here and race for fun and, keep fresh. Shane ran it. Lots of good drivers came over here. Seppi ran a car for Scott McLaughlin, who bounced off everything that was moving in the beginning, but you could see he was going to be good. So I really loved it. It was a lot of fun. It was competitive. We won some races, then that blew up, and I thought, man, I must be the bad jealous around here. So that was the end of Super Tours, and I thought, and just prior, when I came back to New Zealand in 2012, phone rings against Cromley. And
This is Neil Crompton, who you've had a great friendship with for a long
Neil
time.
and I go back a long time, and we love flying together. We think alike in a lot of ways. He's anal. I'm sort of not as bad as that, but we do complement, and we think the same way in a lot of things. So Neil said, when the supercars are looking for a new chairman of the commission, I said, what the hell's that? And well, it's just all the team owners get together and they control the rules and the rule book, but they need someone strong and smart to control them, because Scafie had been doing it, but it kind of got a little bit out of control. I think not because of Mark, but that they were leading the ship rather than the other way around. So I went over there and chatted to them, and I remember Roland was in the room when we were doing the interview and talked about it. And so anyway, I signed on for this. So suddenly I went to the dark side.
Because you've gone from team to the
So suddenly
administration
I'd gone over the pit wall. I was now an administrator, and I thought, But I learned a huge amount, worked with James Warburton and Sean Seamer, both really good guys, great group of team owners. The series was on a big up. There were a number of issues, a lot of discussion about parity, because we had Nissan, Volvo, Ford, Holden obviously, so Mercedes was in there as well, sort of.
You refined that parity process with Steve Hallam, I think, didn't you?
And the first thing I noticed was the aero process was pretty archaic.
Okay, yeah.
So Steve Hallam was on the commission, and I really liked Steve. He was a smart, forward thinker, but very unemotional. I said to Steve, I know there's something wrong here. We need to measure the ruler. Is the ruler right? So we got stuck into that, and Steve did all the work. And we come up with a number of changes on the aero program, which moved it to another level. It still wasn't right, and it's still ongoing. But engine parity was another one. Worked a lot with Craig Hasted on that, and I really loved the time at Supercars.
That's 6 years, I think, was it?
I think it was 6 years. Met a lot of really cool people, very passionate racers, and COVID came along. I couldn't travel, so that was the end of that job. And obviously Supercars was in survival mode. It was changing ownership. So I did my time. Really liked it. And I'll just finish off this part of the journey. So I'm at home one day and the phone rings. It's Tony Quinn. And I didn't know him that well. And Tony said, Steve, I need a bit of advice. So he said, I'm thinking of buying a team, and what do you think of DJR? Because you've been around all these teams, you know what they're like. And I said, well, yeah, it's a very good team. I know Ryan Story, they're really good. And we're talking to him, and he said, there's one other thing. He said, I get all these drivers coming to me wanting money and sponsorship, and I've given money here, I've given money there, but I don't quite know whether I'm doing the right thing. And I said, well, actually on a 10% scale of what you're doing, I kind of have the same problem, because my thing is giving back now. So I said to Tony, why don't we get some people together and we'll form like a trust or something, and we'll get some expertise and we'll have a process and we'll form this foundation, and you tell me how much money you want to give away and we'll stick to that. And that was the foundation at the beginning of the Tony Quinn Foundation, which has gone on to be a massive success. Massive success. To quantify it, I was at St. Petersburg for the Indycar round. There were 7 Kiwis there.
That's this year,
racing,
2025, yeah.
Racing open wheel. 4 of them had been through the TQF process. 2 of them had won scholarships there. They would not be there without TQF, no question.
Yep.
So that's kind of up to today, I suppose.
Can we'll come to a couple of the drivers in that and what you're doing there toward the end of this. But I want to come back to one little piece of the IndyCar chapter, if I can. There's a couple little things here. Firstly, you mentioned Tony Kanaan. We can weave Elio Castroneves into this conversation too. There is a chance for you to get these guys on board. There is a thing that you need to tell the audience about called the Gong Show. Is that right? So, I mean, Tony, I think, had a connection to some South American tobacco money. Is that right? And
it was Andre really.
Sorry,
Andre was sponsored by Philip Morris Brazil, which was obviously Marlboro, Cubone ice cream, a number of other products that Philip Morris owned. So I got a call from the president of Philip Morris South America, and he said, Steve, we want to create another era of Brazilian drivers. And we want them to start in Indy Lights. And Andre says you do a good job, so could you run a team for us? I said, well, that sounds like fun. So 95 I won Indycar, 96 was suddenly 2 Indy Lights cars and 2 Indy cars. So suddenly, holy shit, how did this happen? Anyway, I said, well, what about drivers? No, we've got a list of drivers, and Emerson Fittipaldi's helping us with selection. So I said, well, okay, let's set up a process. I like process. We'll go to a racetrack, we'll put them all through the same things, you know, very strictly, and see what pops out.
On and off track. So you're doing like engineering analysis?
It was on track. They got 10 laps to warm up. They got 10 laps to change the setup. Then they got 10 laps on new tyres each day.
Excellent.
Then we interviewed them on what they know about engineering, what they know about sponsorship. And Emerson was there. He was great. Andre was there. And there was a couple of reporters from South America. It was a big deal, the Gong Show. We called it the Gong Show. Somebody was going to win the gong. So anyway, Tony and Elio were there, and I remember going to the motel we're staying at in Phoenix, and these 2 kids walk in, and who's that kid there with the big nose? That was my first impression. Who's that kid with the big nose? Elio spoke pretty good English, but so I was talking to him. He said, "I Tony Kanan," and anyway, he couldn't speak very good English. Anyway, next day we go to the racetrack and get him fit in the cars, and then they do a run, and Tony goes out, and 5 laps. I thought, Jesus Christ, this guy is going to be a star. I just, you know, your waters tell you it straight away, instant. So I thought, well, he's in. We've got to go through the process, but he's in. And then Elio goes out, and he does about 8 laps, and he was really fast. And then he comes in the pits. He didn't do the whole 10 laps.
He was upset too, I think, was he not?
He jumped out of the car, and he went and sat over under the trailer. He started crying. And I thought, what the hell's going on there? So I went over, and I didn't really know him. I said, Elio, whatever's bothering you, we can fix it. He said, oh no, Steve, I've blown my chances. What do you mean? He said, I can't drive anymore. I've got 3 cracked ribs. I had a big crash at Silverstone 5 days ago, and I'm in so much pain I can't drive anymore.
That's gutsy.
Yeah. I said, well, he's in.
Because you admired that. You admired that.
Oh, yeah. And he really, him and Antonio were, you know, they were always fast. So anyway, we had the Gong Show. They got selected. We added a 3rd driver from Argentina to politically keep it correct. So Philip Morris sponsored this team, and away we went. And first year, Tony and Elio, I think, was 2nd and 5th in the championship. But I always said it's going to take 2 years. The next year, they just blitzed it. Came down to the last race. Whoever was going to beat the other one on the track.
How'd you go managing the competitiveness here?
In the end, I just had to let them go. You know, there was nothing you could do. But there was one race in the middle of the season at Toronto, and they're both on the front row. I said, guys, whoever leads the first lap here, whoever gets into the first corner first, has got to lead the first lap. I do not want you bouncing off each other in the walls on the first lap when we're trying to win a championship. Well, that was a red flag, wasn't it? So I don't know who led. I think it might have been Elio led the first corner. They get down the end of the back straight at Toronto, which is a really long straight. They're probably doing 160 mile an hour. Both try to outbrake each other. Both run into each other. Both hit the wall. I had 2 race cars there that normally had 8 wheels there. There are only 3 left between the 2 of them. I thought, Jesus Christ, there's another 200 grand. So anyway, I'm in the pits, and they make their way back down the pits carrying their helmets side by side, and they were sort of looking a bit sheepish, and they see me in the distance, 180, and they were gone. Down the bridge.
They were ultra competitive. I think
but they were mates.
Yeah. There is, I think, I don't know whether they were with you for this, but I think there's a little funny story that I've heard Tony recount on the Dinner with Races podcast. Yeah. At some point here, he gets a little bit of money, and he decides, I'm going to buy myself a mountain bike. He really wanted to buy this Flash mountain bike. But they didn't know where they were going. And I think they ended up on the freeway, and the cops got called or something or other, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right. I made them sort of stay in Columbus and be in the shop in the first year to learn, about race teams and what they were like. And one day they came and said, boss, we haven't got a car. I said, well, go and buy a car. We haven't got any money. So, well, here's $5,000, go and buy a car. So they went and bought an old Honda or Toyota, and they drive it, and they said, boss, the brakes are squeaking. So I got one of the mechanics to have a look, and he said, "Oh, it needs new brake pads." I said, "Tony, go and buy some brake pads, and you and Elia put the brake pads in." Because I'm trying to teach them mechanical shit. Well, what a disaster that was. Took two of the mechanics to unwind what they'd done and fix the car for them. But we had a lot of fun together. They were just great young men, and I could clearly see they were destined. They were destined. So,
aside of the raw speed, what was it? Because they professionally immersed themselves. I think you could. They were sponges. They would soak up a lot of things with you, wouldn't they?
They did. They soaked up a lot of things. We had good engineers. I think they were at the right time in their career. They'd done their apprenticeship and they were ready to break out. And so I think we were able to let the raw speed go, but keep it under control. To a degree. And what a great period. So we won the Indy Lights Championship in '97 with Tony, and Elio was second. And they wanted to go to Indycar. So I couldn't hire both of them. So we ended up hiring Tony, and then I helped Elio get a ride with Tony Bettenhausen, who after 3 races, he said, "Steve, you've actually given me a dud here," because I think Elio had crashed in all 3 races. He'd been very quick. He said, "Mate, you've given me a dud." I said, "No, just hang on a bit." So anyway, Elio did great with Tony and went on to Hogan and then obviously to Penske. But there's a little bit of politics in here because, again, we had Philip Morris Brazil with Marlboro prominent on the car. You'll see a picture of it. But Penske also had Marlboro. And he wanted control of everything. He had this little Marlboro off to one side that he didn't control, another team. So eventually I got the call, "Oh, sorry, we can't support you anymore. That money's going to Penske," and Andre went with.
Okay.
And that's what opened the door for Tony. So,
Hold the mic up a little closer. You're right.
Yeah.
A thought on both of them and what they have gone on to achieve. I mean, Elio with his wins at the Indy 500. You were there with Tony when he finally called time. I mean, to think that you were there and what they went on to achieve in their career is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, but I don't think they've changed personality-wise, Rusty. They've grown up to be really, really good men.
Yes.
They've both gone different directions in what they're doing. Now, Elio's a part owner of an IndyCar team. Tony's the team principal at McLaren now. And, you know, when he got that position, I thought, I can't imagine that. But then when I talked to him, I could see how it's evolved, and I could see the trust that Zach Bronin put into him and what Tony brought to that team. So Christine and I have never had any children. They were our 2 kids.
That's lovely. Crompo, you mentioned him before. As if you weren't busy enough with Indy Lights and IndyCar and everything else, somewhere along the line here, a mate from Oz ends up in a Labatt's sponsored Honda Super Tourer as well.
I'd met Neil at Indy. I can't remember what year. It was in the 80s sometime. He sort of wanted to do a story about IndyCar racing. So
which he loved.
Which normally I would have said no because I didn't want. But something with Neil, I thought, this guy's okay. We'll help him with the story, and we became, good friends. And Neil was driving supercars at the time and doing TV, and he wanted to drive an IndyCar, so he was pretty persuasive. And I said, "Mate, I don't think you're ever going to race an IndyCar because, it's money." But
you gave him a test in one.
But we went. He said, he came back to me and said, "What if I could do a test where I do a story about it and what it's like?" And we went to a track up in Michigan, and Neil had a day in the car driving IndyCar, and he was okay. He was okay.
I'm talking out of school here, so correct me if I don't get this story right. I think he recalls getting in the car, and then the enormity of the moment where, okay, the initial pitch was story for television or whatever. But I think you turned to him at one point, and he was talking as though, he was going to sample this car, talk about it, and so on. But you were like, "This is a proper test. You're going to get in there. We're going to do all of these things, and you're going to deliver."
That's right. There was a film crew there, but I said, "Neil, you're driving a race car. You're not making a story."
Awesome.
So to drive it like you're a race car driver, there was an engineer was there, and we'll develop the car with you and help you learn to drive. And by the end of the day, he was going competitively.
What a great experience for him. Not just a thing for pictures.
So that made me realise, actually, Neil's a pretty good driver. So, I don't know, I think it was 98, they announced this North American Touring Car Series, which was a copycat of the BTCC. And I thought, well, that might be fun to do that. And Honda were obviously strong in BTCC, so I went to Honda and said, oh, would you sponsor a car in this series? They said, well, we're not sure about the series. Maybe after a year we might get involved. So I went to the bank at Christie and said, we're going to buy a touring car from England. Well, how much is that going to cost? And I told her. Anyway, we got this touring car, and I wanted Neil to drive it. So Neil came on board and drove the North American Touring Car Championship for us for 1 year, and it was a blast. It was a lot of fun. His engineer was a guy, Phil Harris, another Kiwi, and our parts manager became the team manager at the weekend. It was sort of a make-up crew, but we went and blitzed them.
Neil reckons he couldn't get anything by the parts manager. There were no foreign orders. It was real strict.
Oh, yeah. We had a lot of fun, and Neil evolved that car really quick. It was really strong. There was a fair amount of politics in it because the series were trying to get American manufacturers involved, and Dodge were involved, and there's a fair amount of backdoor politicking going on that didn't work out so well, but only lasted 1 year. But a lot of fun with Neil, and we're big mates.
Yeah,
you know.
the friendship has remained, and you've done some stuff, around supercars together and so on. I think, ironically, that car has ended up in New Zealand somewhere.
Yeah, it's in Christchurch. I wish I'd never sold it.
Yeah.
I'd love it sitting there next to my other Honda.
It's still, it's an ex-BTCC car, but I think it's still got part of the Labatt's livery, which I think is which is awesome. Can I come to Greg Murphy? Because I think did he not do a test for you as well?
He did. Murph did. I'm trying to think what year. I think it was 1998, and Murph had been pestering me a bit, and I knew Greg sort of in passing. He wanted to break into America. He'd done, Formula Holden, had done really well, and he said, I haven't got any money, but can I come and do a test, and I'll do well at the test, then maybe I'll find some money. So, not in a moment of weakness, so I said, okay, Greg, come along, we'll do a test. We also had Ayrton Dare and Cristiano D'Amato at the test. So Greg came and did a test. He didn't fit very well in the car, but he was on the pace. I think with a couple more days he would have been right there, but it just didn't pan out.
I can remember the build up to that because I was so in awe. I'd come to California Speedway for the first time, got to see Champ Car for the first time, and I recall going with him and the group that we were with travelling, and he sat in Ayrton Dare's car, and we got a picture of it at the time. But I'm glad you filled in the backstory around the testing with him. We've talked Super Tourers. You've talked a little bit about Tony Quinn Foundation. I want to come to some of the drivers in that and why this sort of project really appeals to you. I mean, yesterday I did, my colleague Stephen McIver did an interview with Liam Skeets.
Yeah.
To see the growth of his personality from winning the New Zealand Grand Prix 12 months ago. Yeah. He's marketable. He's come out of his shell, and to witness that growth and to potentially see this guy going on to other things is
And I think with the foundation, what we say to people that come through the TQF process, we're there forever as mentors, as people that can help you. And Liam has impressed me because he's grasped what I call the three-legged stool.
Go.
You've got to be fast on the racetrack. That's one leg. Tick. The second one is you've got to understand the engineering of the cars. So he works really hard on the setup and understanding how it works. And third, you've got to understand the business. And actually, that's the biggest one. Because if you don't have the money, the other two will not come into play. So Liam has worked really, really hard on that and still working hard on it. We're supporting him a bit with the Tasman Motorsports legacy brand. And I think he's got a great future, but it's a big uphill struggle for drivers at that stage. We've also got Callum Hedge that we're supporting, and Callum reminds me of SVG a lot.
Really?
He's just really fast on the racetrack. He's a nice guy to talk to. He's somewhat introverted, and he doesn't want to know about the business or the media. He didn't want to know about any of that.
But is that changing?
It's changing. I'm twisting his arm really hard on that, and he is growing a lot in it. But he's diametrically opposed to Liam when it comes to that
side.
That side, yeah.
The foundation is this great collection of people too, from Murphy. We've talked about yourself on the board there. Tony, obviously, as a driving force, and more. And it has... It's had this ripple effect, hasn't it? You know, people are aware of it now. Young racers that are, even through Toyota 86, they're aspiring to be a part of it and get involved in it, aren't they? So
I think it is a major force in New Zealand motorsport. It's not the only force. There are other people doing a lot of good stuff. I'd like to mention Giltraps. For many, many years have supported New Zealand motor racing, and they deserve a lot more accolades than they get, I think. And there are others that put behind the scenes. Liam Lawson's a good story. You know, a group of South Islanders have funded him to get to where he is. And so Kiwis are good at motorsports. But there's a core group of passionate people that support these young kids. And, you know, Christine and I are proud to do that now. We're in give-back mode. You know,
you're doing that in spades, mate, which I love. You mentioned M2 before, and there's a connection there with Mark Butcher too. We don't often. He's a bit like you in the sense of he's not he doesn't seem like a limelight seeker.
He's an under the radar guy like me. So get on really well with Mark. Obviously, he's done. His record in TRS/CT Frock will never be broken. He's a go-to guy. But one of the things that Mark and I noticed was we'd keep getting these phone calls from mums and dads, and what do we do? How do we do this? How do we do that? And a couple of times we'd given advice and then watch them go the other direction and waste a lot of money. So Mark and I said, why don't we have a little sort of driver management company where people can come to us and feel like they're getting
the right guidance,
the right help. And so we've got Callum Hedge under contract, we've got Liam on a advisory contract, we've got Seb Manson on an advisory contract, and we've got other people knocking on the door. And actually our role is to help the drivers, but also the mums and dads.
Because
you can burn a lot of money, and I don't care how much money you've got. And I think with Seb in particular, we've been able to craft his career path through CT Frock in Japan, here in New Zealand, now in the USA, and I like to think that we've helped guide his pathway in a logical fashion.
Are there any more one-off projects, motorsport-wise? I know you've done a little bit of rallying, for example. The Honda is over the back here.
I've done, I don't know how that happened, but...
Targa.
Targa, came back to New Zealand. Well, we bought a home in 2000, I think, and Targa in New Zealand was going pretty strong. And I'd done a bit of rallying when I was really young, hopeless at it. And I thought, well, that kind of be fun. So I bought a DC2 Honda, and my mate Ian Barlow, who we went to school with, we thought we're just going to have some fun. So I've done, I think, 6 or 7 Targas, Targa Bambinas. We've won our class a couple of times. It was just a fun thing to do. But it got to the stage where, you know, we were both in our 60s, and, you know, I'm probably over driving half the time, and Ian's sitting there next to me, and I just felt responsible for him and I and our wives, and we both came to the same conclusion. We said,
tick that box.
We've ticked that box. One day we're actually going to have a really big one, and we're not sure the outcome is going to be that great. So we both agreed we're stopping. So I've done a little bit of club racing with it, but it's just sitting there getting ready for when it becomes a historic racer, and I'm still a historic man.
Very cool. We're beside a plane. We're in a hangar here. You and Crompo share a love of flying. I've always been intrigued by the parallel, the connection between motor racing and flying. A lot of people that are like yourself, properly into it, have an affinity with it, don't they? When did it become a thing for you, and what do you love about it?
Really, when I was a kid, you know, as I said way back, I wanted to join the Air Force, but I think it's discipline. Being a pilot requires good discipline. It requires ongoing learning. And actually, for me, it was a practical tool, because where we lived in Columbus, most events were within 450 miles. But they had this hub and spoke system in America. So to get from Toronto to Columbus, I'd have to go to Detroit and then Cleveland, and then
it was a mission.
I'd get home at 2 o'clock in the morning. Whereas if I had my own plane, I always took an instructor with me. Sometimes Kristen and I were home at 9 o'clock at night. I'd go to work the next day. I couldn't ask the mechanics to go to work. So it became a business tool. So I've owned 4 aircraft now, flown all over America, Canada, the Caribbean, obviously Neil had 182, and we did an epic trip one year. Neil calls up and said, "Oh, would you like to fly to Darwin?" I said, "What, in the 182?" And he said, "Yeah, we'll take 3 days, we'll go across Australia." We had a wonderful time.
Excellent.
Just the two of us together, flying all day and looking at Australia, and what an amazing country when you fly over it at 5,000 feet. And so
up Tyndall Base and all this sort of stuff.
And Neil's gone on to be a very competent pilot, flying PC-12s now, and I'm just back here in New Zealand flying my 182 as a hobby. Yeah, so but it's discipline.
You talked about bucket list things in another interview I saw, and you said at one stage, as you've reached this point in life, you want to spend a few months each year in Europe with Christine. Are you doing that?
Yeah, we're going later in the year. We're going to France to see her sister. We're going to England to see her brother. I want to go to Bath because I love Roman history, and then we're going to come back and do the Singapore Grand Prix with the Highlands group, who we went to Indy with last year and had an absolute blast. So we're stretching our wings a little bit and doing things for ourselves. But my heart, I don't think I can ever get motorsports out of my blood. I've tried, didn't work. So there'll all be something popping up.
It's a good drug. Around us are all these incredible memories of what you've done over your time, from 86 at the Indy 500, the LCI car, what you did with Honda, even on a personal level. I mean, seeing the most beautiful shot of Christine with Paul Newman. I mean, there's been some remarkable things. When you were this little 7-year-old boy watching the Grand Prix here at Ardmore, did you ever think?
No, it's impossible to think like that, Rusty. But I think if there's a life lesson, follow your passion. I'd say that to anybody. Follow your passion. There's always a pathway doing what you want to do. Never get closeted into anything. And the other thing, and Quinny, I'll agree with this, nothing's impossible. Nothing's impossible. Look at his story.
Yes.
Amazing.
And
I could never, ever have done this without that lady there.
Yeah. Well done.
Never.
Christina's sitting off to the side of us here. I'm super grateful that you've entrusted us to tell a bit more of this, because you are a more of a private person. You preferred to roll the sleeves up, get on with it, do the job, rather than being a show pony and talking about it. There are plenty of people in this country, in America, in Australia, that have huge admiration for what you've achieved. Congratulations.
No, thank you. It's been my life, and on it continues.
On it continues. Yeah. Thank you, Steve, very much.
Thank you for doing this, Rusty. Appreciate it. And it's been great.